Hey everyone, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Paschal. And today we have another interview on our podcast, Grace, Grit, and Hope. And
today we have Vicki Reed with us. You're a author based in Lexington. You have a great background in juvenile justice, and you just completed a book called Sleight of Hand. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you grew up in Lexington, and I imagine Lexington was quite different back then. Tell us about growing up right here in Lexington and where you went to high school and what life was like.
Well, I'm going to date myself a little here because Lexington was so much smaller. It was basically a college town. New Circle Road had not been built, just the stoplight parts. When it finally got done, we drove all the way around it. We thought that was really fun. Everybody in Lexington was doing it. And I remember when the Interstate 75 was built, went through. And at that time, you would drive on 75, and all the people would talk about how beautiful it was because on both sides you saw horse farms, which, of course, now you don't see any horse farms off 75. Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I had a good time. And I went right here to Bryan Station High School.
And in high school were you athletic? Were you a band person? What did you do?
Well, actually, I did a little of all of that. I played clarinet in the band for a while, and then I was on the tennis team and went on to Eastern Kentucky University and played tennis for them all 4 years.
Wow, must have been pretty good.
And I still play tennis.
Wow,
well, good for you.
It's a lifelong sport. That's a good sport.
Yes, it can be. Yes.
While you were at Eastern Kentucky University, you got into the criminal justice study program. Tell us, how did that all develop?
Well, I fell into it, basically. I was one of those people that had no idea what they wanted to do when they went to college. A lot of people knew I want to teach, I want to be a nurse. I was like, I have no clue. So I was an undecided major. And since I was so into athletics, it seemed natural. I switched to PE. And didn't really enjoy that. So then I kind of merged into, believe it or not, they have a degree called recreation. That sounds like a good fun degree, doesn't it? And that didn't click either. And then my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband for 49 years, we just had our anniversary.
Wow,
said,
congratulations.
You should do political science or whatever. And I'm like, why? Well, he convinced me it'd be a good thing to do. So I did. And one of the electives for political science was a law enforcement course. And I do not know why to this day that I went to that and it just clicked. And I said, well, I want another one of those. And I ended up getting my degree in law enforcement. And I had like 3 minors because I had to take like 40 hours each semester because I kept switching majors.
You ended up getting your master's, right?
Yes. And that was back on the old, I don't know if you remember, Lyndon Johnson LEAA dollars. And so it was all paid for. And then you had to work, I think it was 5 years afterwards, or you had to pay it all back. So I got a little slip every 6 months or year. Are you still working in criminal justice? So so I just took like a class every semester. So it was a kind of a long process. But I got my master's in criminal justice with a specialization in juvenile justice.
And I believe in your last semester, you were fortunate to get an internship where you actually got a look at juvenile justice, not just looking in the book in the classroom, but you got to see our juvenile justice system.
How it's done.
And what was your impression?
Well, very different than, it actually showed me that my education was not really bringing me up to what I need to do because a lot of it had been policies and laws and history and whatever, but nobody really taught me how you sit down and do stuff with kids and families. And even after I moved on into a probation officer position, which I was fortunate to do, the internship, the probation officer position came open, and I was already doing that, and they were like, hey, why don't you do that? And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And so my boss came in and slapped a bunch of folders on my desk and said, these kids haven't been seen in a while. You need to get on that. That was my training. So I was like calling these people. I was like, what do I say to them? Whatever. So it was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah. And I know to the juveniles, you probably seemed like an old person, but you really weren't much older than them.
I was not, and sometimes I don't think I did seem like an old person. I have to say, years later, when I was running the group home, we took some kids to Kings Island. One of their favorite things to do was they had a little thing there where they'd guess age. And so I'm out with all these teenage kids and whatever, and they never guessed I was as old. We always won a prize. So unfortunately, years have gone by, and that's no longer the case.
Were you surprised at the conditions that the juveniles were housed in, and can you tell us about that?
I was more than surprised. I was shocked, and looking back, I'm still shocked. And I remember just thinking, this is where we put kids? Because, I mean, it was really, really terrible. And I say it's cliche, but I really wouldn't have boarded my dog there. The building had been built several years before, and the main middle parts of it, which had been supposedly for the kids, the dining room, the whatever, had all been moved into staff offices through the years, and the kids were just in the concrete wings. The only furniture in there was some metal bunk beds, which were really dilapidated looking, and that was it.
Wow.
The kids ate their food either sitting on the bottom bunk or they sat on the floor. There was no TV. There was no.
Oh,
the only
shock.
recreation was a deck of cards. They were given a deck of cards, and they smoked. They smoked a lot.
Oh, yeah.
One of my jobs, I actually did work there a little part time. My last internship, the graveyard shift, because they were so desperate to get people in there to work. And one of my big things was to light the kids' cigarettes.
Eating on the floor, eating on their bed, smoking cigarettes, no furniture, concrete. What in the world were the adults thinking?
I still do not know. It was just amazing. And, you know, it was sweltering hot in the summer, and they had bought air conditioning units for the staff for the main part of the building where their offices were, but none for the kids. So the kids were, literally, it was just like a oven box. It was just still.
Oh, no
I'm
air
still
conditioning.
shocked. No air conditioning. And they, it was a horrible place.
What was the temperature in there on a August day?
Oh, I'm not sure, but it had to be way up there. They did occasionally bring in some huge, big fans on the most sweltering days.
Yeah. What was the thought? These kids have done bad things, and we need to punish them.
I mean, most of the kids there were not there because they hadn't been found guilty of anything. I mean, it's pre-trial, so innocence until proved guilty. So there was, and a lot of the kids there were, especially back then, status offenders. They were runaways and truants and that sort of thing. So they weren't some big horrible criminal. I don't know. I still don't know to this day how people justified that.
Yeah, Paschal ran away from home twice.
Oh, I was a borderline delinquent. I sympathized with kids 3 times. I actually freight trained twice. And no, I understand.
Yeah.
And it was trouble at home I had to get away from. And so I was borderline. And the only thing that saved me was an 8th grade teacher who decided to believe in me. That one person changed me.
Yeah.
So I identify with the kids very easily, Vicki. Yeah.
Well, I think, Vicki, that's been a hallmark of your career. Correct me if I'm wrong, that one caring adult can make all the difference.
Absolutely, and that's why mentoring is very effective, and therapeutic foster care has been very effective. Just finding, teachers. I think that's one. The big expert on youth violence has always said that if a kid has one adult in the school who thinks they're terrific, that kid won't be a shooter.
Oh, no.
Wow.
It's a miracle the way she turned my life around. But at that point, I was really borderline. I won't tell you the stuff I was doing, but
Yeah.
And she, the one person believed in me, and it just. I can't say enough about it right now.
Yeah.
Sister Mary Philippa
I was
Henderson,
going to say,
Sister Loretta, and I went down to visit her grave many times.
Wow.
So you're right. One single person, caring person, can make a huge difference.
So this began a journey for you where you started the first youth home, whatever you want to call it, youth center. Can you tell us about that? I'm talking Fayette County.
Right. At that time, there was some grant money available, and I had, like I said, I'd been a probation officer, and I really felt like a lot of the kids I dealt with needed more. They needed a decent situation to live in. And so with some others, groups I had, applied for and got a grant to open a second. Well, let me back up a little bit. I was hired as the director of Metro Group Homes Incorporated, and at that time they ran a group home for adolescent kids, and it was a 6 months program that for kids who needed another situation. But there wasn't anything for short-term kids that just needed a roof over their head, so they stayed in detention. It would be like, well, we would release them. They're not a public safety danger, but we need 3 hots and a cot, to least to let them go. So we applied for this grant and obtained it, and were able to look for opening a short, up to 30 days alternative detention shelter program.
Yeah. What was there opposition to that?
There was, and I always say that the hardest part was getting the house, because it was going to be just 8 kids, and so it was supposed to be a home-like environment. And as you can expect, probably having a youth shelter in your neighborhood was not everybody's idea of a great thing, and I get that. So we got the grant, and there was time limitations on it. So we found the house. We got a lawyer who drafted the proposal and an architect who drew up the plans, and we went to the zoning board, and we got killed.
Yeah.
So we got denied, and so we had one more cycle of the zoning board, and if we didn't get a house, we wouldn't have the grant and the shelter wouldn't happen. So I went out and found 3 homes that we could have liked, and since we didn't have the money to do what we did before, I just took the first template and just substituted the different addresses and then the architect, who I'm sure had done a much better job, I just took a ruler and kind of copied, well, okay, this is what he did. And so we submitted all 3. And we got there that day, and they were like, you want 3 houses? And we said, no, we just want 1. And they're like, we're very confused. I said, well, if we get the first one, we'll just drop the other 2. And we have people from all 3 houses in opposition in the audience. And so, the one guy on the board looked at the other and goes, can she do that? And I go, no, I guess there's anything. Apparently nobody else had ever done it. So being no fools, we got the first one.
Good.
That
It
was
the one
smart.
we really wanted. And
But
actually, it was so funny because the people that were there to oppose the second and third one, even though now they didn't have to worry about it, were kind of mad. they were there, they prepared speeches and all that stuff.
Oh,
so
they didn't get to make their speeches.
they didn't get to say a thing or whatever. And honestly, I think after that they changed the rules where you could only do it one time. I was a trailblazer, so
Yeah.
it was kind of funny. But anyway, the rest was history. We got our house, and it's now Arbor Youth. And it's changed locations and changed through the year, but Arbor Youth Services is still in existence, and they do a great job.
You're probably going to be humble about this, but you also blazed a path with Kentucky's juvenile detention plan, or you were at least part of it. I know that. Can you tell us about that?
Right. I happened to go to work at DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice in Kentucky, in its infancy. It used to be part of child welfare. They were all one agency. And then it split off because of numerous reasons, too lengthy to go into here. And one of the things there was to get all the kids out of adult jails, and as part of that, to try to get as many kids out of juvenile detention as possible. So my job was to head up the alternatives, juvenile detention alternatives. So we established, they're still around today, Detention Alternative Coordinators, which is DACs. And I named them, and I hired them all. And if they ever complained about their name being a DAC, I always say, well, it could be worse. It could have been Detention Understanding Coordinator, and you've been ducks. So, didn't have to worry about that. And then their job was to work with the detention centers and find other placements for kids that didn't need to be there. And let me tell you, there are some kids that need to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some kids, I don't want people to think I'm not realistic about that. There were some kids that's absolutely where they needed to be. But for some kids, it was simply a matter of they didn't have anywhere to go, and that's why they were there, especially maybe a foster kid shoplifted or did something, and you and I would have gone and got our other kid and taken them home and grounded them or whatever, and the foster parent said, "That's it. No, just keep them." And then the kids stayed in detention, so they looked for other placements for them.
Is it fair for me to think that nothing good happened for anyone housing juveniles with adult criminal offenders?
And again, that's a horrible situation that when I look back on it, can't believe, because one of the things that we did in the process of that was going around and looked at some of the places that had been holding kids. And what they did, of course, for their own safety, was they didn't mingle them in with the population. So they would put them maybe in the temporary holding cell or isolation to keep them safe. But so they were just in this little room. And I remember one time there was a kid, they put a TV in the hall, and he had the food slot. And the only way he would watch the TV by holding up the food slot and looking out through the thing.
Yeah.
But, we're talking 12, 13-year-old kids sometimes. So it was not a good situation. And some horrible things happened. And that's one of the things that led to the changes is a couple of kids hung themselves.
Wow.
And big major lawsuits occurred. And really, most of the jailers and county officials, they didn't want them there either because of the huge liability and paying out these $1 million lawsuits for things that happened with the kids. So
these tragic situations were national, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily Fayette County.
Oh, it wasn't. And it wasn't Fayette County. Fayette County, actually, we had, when I described the juvenile detention center, how horrible it was a separate one. At the time, there were only two. Louisville had one and Lexington had one. All the rest of the state, the kids went to adult jails.
Yeah, okay. At some point, you decide, I think I can make a bigger impact by writing about my experiences in books of fiction. Can you, and Paschal can relate to this because he is a writer too, who's written 50 books.
Wow, that's amazing.
From his life experience as a psychologist. But at some point, you make a transition to author. Can you tell us about the transition to author, why you did it, and what happened?
Sure. Well, I retired from Department of Juvenile Justice when I was in my early 50s. Back then you could do the 27 and out, and you could buy years and all that. And I left the system for a while, and I was working at Floorcliff Nature Preserve, where I'm still
Wow.
involved.
I live right next to Floorcliff.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm on the board.
I lived there for 6 years.
Oh, my gosh. Well, we'll have to talk about that later. So I'm out there one day, and we're cutting honeysuckle, and there's a guy there who had just came from Colorado, and he'd been a alternative school principal. And we started talking about kids and whatever, and it just sort of, all of a sudden, I got the fire again. I started thinking, well, I should write down something about all these cases and kids and things I knew. And so I was going to write a nonfiction book about juvenile justice. And I kept trying to get it going, and it just would go nowhere. And so one night I'm up and just couldn't sleep just for whatever reason. And it was 3 a.m, and I was trying to think what I could do about this book. And I thought, well, what if I took a hypothetical kid and took him through the system and wrote a fiction book, which I read a lot more fiction. I had never desired to write a book to that point, but I'm a prodigious reader. I love to read, and also, that was the other thing. Anytime I read a fiction book about juvenile stuff, it was so wrong.
Yeah.
It was obviously the people who wrote it had no idea. And here's the standard thing you'd have. They have some kid there, and his gang-banging buddies come to visit him, and they tell him, if you squeal on us, we're going to whatever. And I'm sitting there going, kids can't visit kids in detention. They only let parents and their attorneys. That's a thing. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So part of it was, Mary Lou Angelou said if there's a book you want to read that's not out there, write it yourself.
Yeah.
So anyway, so The Car Thief was born.
Yeah. Tell us about The Car Thief of 2020, I think, when it was published. What inspired? How did it all come together?
Well, and of course, I like that you mentioned it was released in May of 2020.
Kind of a bad
yeah,
time.
not the best time to release your initial book. Yeah, the pandemic was boring, and so we'd bought all these books to do things in person, and of course none of those happened. But no, I did. I ended up working on the book and worked with Mary Knight.
Yeah.
On
Local author
and mentor to help me, and editor to help me do that. And so we just started with it, and I just knew I wanted to take a kid all the way through. I wanted to take him from running away from home and being a status offender, being a dependent kid, on up until he touched the juvenile justice system and beyond, to show how kids can get ensnarled in the system.
Yeah. My take, I think what I gathered from everything I've read is the kids respond a whole lot better to loving care rather than harsh treatment. And is that a central theme for you?
It is. And a lot of people, John Q. Public, I call it, think, well, if you put a kid in detention, they're gonna think, wow, this is awful and horrible, and I'm gonna be good, and this is never gonna, I'm gonna shape up and fly right, and that's just not the case. As a matter of fact, all the research shows the number one factor for kids who go on to become adult criminals is they were detained as juveniles.
Wow.
And that's more than having abusive parents, drug abuse, poverty, whatever. Because once you walk through that door, it's a life-changing experience. And unfortunately for a lot of kids, what happens is when they get in there, they find their tribe.
Yeah.
It's like, they find people who are like them and who are struggling. And nowadays, it's even more so because, back then, somebody might say, well, call me. Now they can just say, well, look me up, on my social media or whatever, and, hey, I got a corner you can sell drugs from.
Yeah.
So you might have a kid go in for shoplifting a pair of tennis shoes who ends up, going on to become a drug dealer. So it's really best to keep the kids from being, nothing good can come from putting 40 bad kids together.
Yeah,
So,
I love it. I love that. Yeah.
So it's much better to put them in a more pro-social environment where they're exposed to positive activities and positive people than that. And like I said, some kids have to be there. We know that. But as many as you can keep out, it's better.
What that psychologically, what the harsher environment is, it's a confirmation of their own story that they learn from the very beginning of their lives as they begin to experience things. And there are many things they had to repress about being hurt and angry and offended and getting the short end. So in a harsh environment, they're getting confirmation of that original story that they wrote about themselves. And so it only reinforces their shadow self, the parts that they buried and hid from. So it's confirmation. Get a harsh, but see the caring is different. So this is just a note on the background.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I wonder if on the car thief, Kelly is the character, and can you tell us about, briefly about his struggle and what you intended to show through his character about the difference between a bad kid and a kid in a bad situation?
Right, and I had to make him smart because it was through his eyes, and one of the things that I worked with Mary on this when we were developing the book was I wanted to do a lot of informing on juvenile justice. But this is also a fiction book, so it's got to have an entertaining story, and you can't get too preachery in it.
Yeah.
Is preachery a word? I don't think so.
I like it.
I'll make it up. I'm an author. It's fiction. So we had to have, a good story. So I decided that he needed to be very likable and he needed to be very smart. And he, in a way, is not your typical kid in juvenile justice. He's sort of there also as an observer. But part of the thing with the story was showing that even a basically good kid like him is put in a situation where, it could go the other way for him. Because a lot of times we describe the juvenile justice system as a highway with lots of on-ramps and very little off-ramps.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's, bad about a lot of laws that they write, they make the laws all. They don't make it, they use the word you shall be instead of you could be or you may be. And so for instance, on the one thing, they had a thing that anybody who does this, this, and this must be tried as an adult. And then you get some kid that really is, I described it, you set a trap for a tiger and you catch a kitten.
Yeah.
But you have no choice because that's the law. So these decisions need to be made on an individual basis, and look at somebody like Kelly and see that there was a lot more to them than a kid who stole a car.
Yeah. When you go to Sleight of Hand, the book that was just the fiction piece that was just published, and it focuses on foster care and the impact of moving a child from one place to another, to another, to another, to another. Can you tell us about Sleight of Hand and that whole theme of foster care? That what were you trying to get across?
Well, when I wrote The Car Thief, I thought it was a one and done. But I so enjoyed the experience, and I had a lot of people saying, "Well, when's your next book coming out? We loved it."
Yeah,
I'm like, "Oh,
yeah." And it was received quite well.
Oh, yes, it was. Much of my surprise and delight. And actually, Car Thief won 2 national awards.
Wow!
I won the reader's favorite, and it was legal fiction. A legal thriller, that's what it was, which was kind of funny because I didn't really think of it as a legal thriller. But if they want to give me a prize, by golly, it's a legal thriller. And I also won the New York Big Book Award. So
wow!
Yeah, so
congratulations!
It ended up doing very well. I got to go to New Jersey and have a red carpet treatment thing.
Congratulations!
It was fun. So anyway, I decided that I would work on another book, and so. Kind of inspired by a couple of things. One, I wanted to go more upriver to somebody who was starting to touch the juvenile justice system but wasn't deeply ingrained in it. So it was taking them, back a step. And the other was when we had a case when I was with juvenile justice of a child who was committed to us as a delinquent at 16, but this child had been committed to child welfare since she was a toddler.
Okay.
And she'd had 64 placements.
Wow.
That was foster care, shelters, group homes, hospitals, residential. And I love the one line they said she had a hard time trusting people. And I thought, you think? So that's why Alex, the boy in the story, I had him having 64 placements. I picked that number from that to show the effect of what that would do to you, having to, can you imagine being 16 and living in 64 different places and not knowing where you're going to live next?
Yeah. Is that common?
Well, 64 is a little not common, thankfully. But 20s and 30s is not horribly uncommon.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
You explore this theme of resilience. Some of the kids are really resilient, and others, I guess the system swallows them up. Paschal loves that theme of resilience. He's written about it quite a bit. Can you talk about that? Why is that central to your work?
Well, I think a lot of people think, for one thing, that these kids that get into the system are write-offs, and that's not at all true because so many of them can rise above it and do so well. And I mean, I've seen tons of success. And one thing not to give a spoiler with my stories, is they have a rather positive ending, and some people are thinking, well, how likely is that? And I'm saying, well, it's true. A lot of kids don't have a good ending, but there are a lot of kids that do, and a lot of kids that go on to be very successful. And I really have to date myself because one of the people when I do conferences and stuff I talk about who had a juvenile record was Steve McQueen.
Oh.
And yes, he had a juvenile record, was incarcerated and so forth. And then, but lately when I have to update it because when I said his name, nobody knew who he was. I'm like, I kept going, Bullet, the movie? And I'm like, there were like 20 and 30-year-olds out there, and they're like giving me this blank look. But anyway, so I have to update my success kids, but there are a lot of people that go on that
I share your pain. A lot of people don't know who I'm talking about either.
But and the other theme of the book was grief, because that was one of the things with him. He had to come to terms with the grief, and that we see that with a lot of our kids. Kentucky actually has one of the I think it's the highest number of kids who have had parents and siblings die. And a lot of kids act out and have, issues with that and have to deal with that. So that was another theme of the story.
Okay. Where can people go to learn more about your work and get copies of your books or order copies of your books?
Well, they can get Car Thief off Amazon. They can also go to my website, vreedauthor.com, and order straight from there. For Sleight of Hand, they can go to, again, off Amazon. And also they can order Sleight of Hand off any bookstore. And a lot of bookstores aren't carrying it, but they can, like with any book, just say, can you order this? And it can be ordered. And it's also at the library. They're here at the library.
Oh, good. Good
yes,
for them.
At several libraries, about most of the surrounding counties and so forth have it.
Yeah, we've got to work on some of the local booksellers.
That would be good. And and it's hard for a small, I've both times been published by small independent publishers. So it's not like, the Doubleday and Penguin and some of the big ones. So, there's so many people. The good and the bad is a lot of people can write books now because anybody can do it. So you can put it on Amazon. But that also means there's a lot more books out there. So your competition's pretty stiff.
Yes. Well, we are coming to the close of our time, and I open the floor to both of you. I've asked a bunch of questions. What haven't I asked? What would you like to say that we haven't talked about?
Well, two things come to mind. One is just the public perception, and that was the other reason I wrote the book, because people, they just don't know, and part of that's the system. It's closed. You can't go. I mean, nobody hardly knows what goes on behind those closed doors.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's ever a time if you went up to the man on the street and said, what do you think about juvenile crime? Is it good, bad, whatever? And that's, it's terrible, it's awful, it's horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
And for many years, juvenile crime was the lowest it has been in recorded history.
Wow.
Way down. But nobody thinks that.
Yeah,
and part of that's the media, because, if a 38-year-old guy does something horrible, it's sort of, but if a 13-year-old does it, it's front page, it's all over there, and it kind of adds to that perception. But juvenile crime is not out of the roof. And the second thing was just, if anybody is interested in being a part of the solution, I would like to refer them to the CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocates.
Okay.
And this was the other thing in Sleight of Hand. I made sure I had what we call a CASA worker in there, and these are the kids that are signed a kid. They advocate for them in court. They visit with them. They are there. They may change foster homes. They may change social workers, but they may have the same CASA worker who's there for them. And that's that really important person. So if you can be a CASA volunteer, that's great. And if you can't, just to support them financially or go to one of their fundraisers. And it is funny because I have to shout out to Melinda Jameson, who's the head CASA person in Lexington, and she read The Car Thief and loved it. But she said that kid needed a CASA worker. So I made sure in Sleight of Hand he has a CASA worker.
Wow, good.
So I encourage people, if they'd be interested in that, to look into it.
Let me pick up on that, try to expand a little further. Suppose someone wants to volunteer, and you said CASA worker. Where would they go to volunteer?
Well, they can go to the website, and I think it's just a place you can click if you want to volunteer, or you just call them. They are always looking for folks. So yeah, pretty easy to do. And there's training involved.
Training. So are there other organizations that people interested in juvenile justice might become? So nonprofits are still growing at a good rate,
right.
20% a year, and
right.
continue to grow. So
hopefully,
right. People listening here will say, hey, maybe that's something I would like to get involved in. So what are there other things? What would you say to help promote that?
I think Arbor Youth, and I'm not involved with them anymore, but I think they probably take volunteers. And Big Brothers Big Sisters, almost there's Winchester has Mentors and Meals where they have people come in. If you look at some of those organizations, you can go online. It's kind of like naming Santa's reindeer. I know them, but I can't pull them all out of my head at the same time. But there's lots of places that I'm sure would be real happy to have somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Vicki, thank you for being here. Thank you for your work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
Amazing
being
work.
an advocate for a better juvenile justice system, and we appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you very much. It was great talking with you.
And thank you for going ahead and writing those 2 books.
All right. Well, I may have a third on the way. We'll see.
All right.
I'll drop that tidbit at the
Any
end.
hints about it?
Well, it's going to have to be about a girl, I'm told, because I wrote these first 2 stories about a boy, and people tell me, when are you going to write about a girl? So if I do a third book, it's going to have to be about a girl.
Okay. So all you women out there have something to look forward to.
There you go.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.